Have you ever felt trapped in a life that wasn't truly yours? Forced to choose between meeting everyone's expectations or following the voice of your own heart? Today, I'm going to share the story of a woman who dared to challenge it all: her family, her culture, even her fate. She chose to chase freedom and true love, despite having no guarantees. And in the end, she found something we all long for: a way to live her own truth with courage. Get ready, shall we begin? The silence of the desert was magical. Not the kind of empty silence, but one that carried the soft melody of the wind shifting the sands and the distant sounds of some nocturnal animal. Under a sky blanketed with stars, Layla Khalil sat by a campfire, lost in thought. The daughter of a wealthy merchant, she had grown up surrounded by luxury and comfort, but freedom. Ah, that was a distant dream. Since she was young, Layla had been drawn to the desert. During the years she spent studying in Europe, she developed a taste for what many deemed improper for a woman: independence. There, far from her family's strict traditions, she experienced what it was like to walk without restrictions, to live without shackles. But upon her return, she was met with the chains of her reality. Her father had promised her hand in marriage to a distant prince. It was the destiny tradition demanded, but not the one her heart desired. On nights when she managed to escape the watchful eyes of the guards, Layla would ride alone through the desert. It was the only place where she felt she could truly be herself. On one of these escapades, when she reached a hidden oasis, her life changed forever. While setting up her camp, Layla heard footsteps. Her hand instinctively went to the weapon she carried hidden. Suddenly, out of the shadows emerged a tall man with piercing eyes and a presence that seemed to carry the weight of countless stories. He was Farouk Hakim, a wanderer and caravan guide. Farouk was not just a man of the desert, he was a man shaped by it. His past was marked by tragedy. He had lost his wife and daughter in a brutal attack while he was away. Since then, he had roamed the sands, torn between the desire for revenge and the search for some semblance of peace. When he saw her, a young woman so out of place in the middle of the desert, something inside him stirred. Layla, in turn, saw in him a fascinating contrast to the world she knew. He was raw, intense, yet carried a depth she had never found in the men of her city. "What are you doing here alone, miss?" Farouk asked, his voice both firm and gentle. Layla raised her chin, trying to appear brave. "This is the only place where I can be free." He smiled faintly, recognizing something familiar in her, the same longing to escape, the same restlessness that drove him to wander the desert. Yet, he also knew the dangers she faced. "It is not safe for a woman to wander these lands alone, especially at night," Farouk said. Layla replied firmly, "I can defend myself. And besides, the danger of being trapped in the life that awaits me is far greater." Though Farouk respected her courage, he couldn't shake his concern. He decided to keep his distance but watched her from afar to ensure nothing happened to her. When Layla broke camp the next morning, he introduced himself. "Farouk Hakim. And you?" "Layla Khalil, daughter of the merchant Khalil." Farouk was surprised. He recognized her father's name, a powerful and traditional man. Now, he understood her yearning for freedom on a deeper level. Over time, Layla and Farouk crossed paths again at the same oasis. The desert, vast as it seemed, brought them together as if conspiring in their favor. Their conversations began cautiously, but soon grew into an intensity neither could control. They started meeting regularly, and each visit to the oasis became more special. Sitting under the palms or walking along the golden sands, they shared stories of their lives, dreams, and fears. Layla spoke of the pressures from her family and the expectations of being the perfect wife, while Farouk shared the pain of his past and his quest for redemption. These conversations not only deepened their connection, but also built a bond of trust and mutual understanding. Layla found in Farouk something she had never experienced, someone who saw her as a person, not a symbol or obligation. Farouk, in turn, felt that Layla brought light to a heart that had long lived in darkness. He began to look forward to their meetings as a chance to escape his loneliness and rediscover joy. "You know, I can never truly be free, Farouk," Layla said one night as they walked under a star-filled sky. He stopped and looked at her, as if trying to memorize every detail of her face. "Then run away with me. Leave it all behind." The proposal took her by surprise. Running away meant abandoning her family and her life of comfort, but it also meant embracing the love that was beginning to bloom between them. Despite the doubts that plagued her, Layla knew that each meeting with Farouk made the impossible seem more tempting. Back at her home, Layla wrestled with her thoughts. Her father, having discovered yet another of her escapes, confronted her harshly. "You will marry the prince, whether you like it or not. Enough of disobeying our traditions." Layla, however, couldn't ignore the storm growing inside her. Each meeting brought her closer to an impossible decision. When she returned home, she was met with her father's stern gaze and the preparations for the approaching wedding. The walls of her house, which once seemed to protect her, now suffocated her. Layla spent sleepless nights replaying moments with Farouk in her mind. She could feel the warmth of his presence, hear the sound of his laughter, and recall the unspoken security he offered. But fear lingered, whispering in her mind. What if running away was a mistake? What if Farouk couldn't provide the life she was accustomed to? She loved the desert, but could she truly leave behind her comfortable home and everything she knew? And most of all, what if Farouk didn't truly want her? One night, as she stared at the ceiling of her room, anguish overtook her. She didn't want to be the wife of a man she barely knew. She didn't want to spend the rest of her life following orders, devoid of the love and passion she had seen in Farouk's eyes. Farouk's words echoed in her mind. "Run away with me. Leave it all behind." Tears streamed down her face, a mix of fear, hope, and longing. She knew that if she stayed, her soul would be consumed by an emptiness that could never be filled. The next day, as she helped organize the wedding preparations, Layla made her decision. She spent the day pretending to be resigned, but inside, adrenaline coursed through her veins. That night, she hid her backpack, filled with her mother's jewels and a few clothes, and waited until the entire house was silent. With her heart racing, she opened the window of her room and gazed at the moonlit desert. Every fiber of her being screamed that this was the right choice. She mounted her camel and rode off, leaving behind her home, traditions, and a life that wasn't hers. That night, the silence inside the house felt heavier than ever. Layla's breathing quickened as she looked at the backpack she had prepared so carefully. Her mother's jewels were safely packed, along with a few pieces of clothing and enough supplies to survive in the desert for a while. Her thoughts were consumed by her last conversation with Farouk and his words that echoed in her mind. "Run away with me. Leave it all behind." While everyone slept, she opened her bedroom window. Outside, the moonlight bathed the desert in a mysterious beauty. Her heart pounded so loudly she feared someone might hear it. Carefully, she climbed out, mounted her camel, and rode off without looking back. Each step the animal took carried her further from the life she knew and closer to a future that was uncertain but brimming with possibility. When she reached the oasis, Layla found Farouk waiting under the palm trees. It was as if he had been expecting her. When their eyes met, a wave of emotion so intense washed over her that she nearly leaped off the camel to embrace him. Farouk walked toward her, and his gaze held something she had never seen before, a mix of relief, admiration, and love. "I knew you would come, Layla," he said, his deep, steady voice laced with emotion. Layla dismounted from the camel, still a little hesitant. She took a deep breath, trying to find the right words to express everything she was feeling. "I couldn't stay there, Farouk. My soul felt trapped. I needed something real, something I've only found here," she said, her eyes brimming with tears. Farouk gently took her hands, looking deeply into her eyes, as if trying to etch that moment into his memory. "You are the bravest woman I've ever met. I promise, as long as we're together, I'll do everything to make you feel free and happy," he said with a conviction that made Layla's heart race. In that moment, Layla felt a peace she had never experienced before. She knew the decision she had made wasn't easy, but she also knew she would never regret it. Here, among the oasis palms and the warmth of Farouk's presence, was the future she had always longed for but never dared to imagine. On the first night after her escape, the desert felt even more vast and silent, cloaked in silver moonlight that cast a soft glow over the dunes. Layla and Farouk were camped beneath the palms of the oasis, the sound of the wind brushing through the leaves creating an almost hypnotic melody. The small campfire illuminated their faces, highlighting the bright spark in Farouk's eyes and the shy flush that crept up Layla's cheeks. Sitting close together, the silence between them was not uncomfortable, it was filled with something deep and indescribable. Layla's heart raced as she looked at Farouk, who seemed completely at ease in a setting he commanded with his presence. He was the embodiment of the desert, strong, unpredictable, and full of mystery. "I've never felt so free before," Layla said, breaking the silence, her voice almost a whisper. Farouk raised his eyes to her, his lips curving into a smile that carried both tenderness and desire. "The desert has that power. It frees you from everything. But it also reveals who you really are." Layla felt his words resonate within her. It was true. In that moment, she wasn't the merchant's daughter, promised to a prince she'd never met. She was just a woman, finally free to live and feel. Farouk reached out and gently touched her face, his calloused fingers tracing her skin with unexpected softness. Layla closed her eyes for a moment, feeling a wave of warmth flood her body. When she opened them again, Farouk's gaze was locked onto hers with an intensity that left her speechless. "If this is too much for you, tell me now," Farouk said, his voice low and almost hoarse. "But know that I've never wanted anything as deeply as I want you." Layla didn't respond with words. Instead, she leaned in, feeling his warm breath against her skin, until their lips met. The kiss was soft at first, as if they were both exploring uncharted territory, but it quickly deepened, filled with urgency and passion. The night unfolded in a rhythm that seemed outside the bounds of time. Farouk held her as though she were both fragile and untamed, while Layla surrendered completely, without reservation. He was patient, guiding her along a path she had never walked before, but that felt incredibly natural. Every touch, every kiss, every shared breath revealed something new about herself. For the first time, Layla understood desire and the overwhelming power of feeling completely connected to another person. They lost themselves in each other, with the desert as their silent witness. Layla discovered what it meant to let go of physical restraints and join with someone so completely that there was no room for doubt or fear. That night, she was no longer the same. She was a transformed woman, aware of her own power and her capacity to love. When they finally fell asleep, their bodies entwined under the starry sky, Layla felt she had found more than freedom. She had uncovered a part of herself she had never known existed, all in the hands of a man who, like the desert, seemed infinite and untamed. Together, they began a new life. By day, they explored the dunes and set up camps surrounded by the vastness of the desert. At night, they shared stories and dreams under the star-filled sky. Layla learned to live simply, but with an intensity she had never experienced before. Farouk, in turn, rediscovered the joy he thought he had lost forever. Back at the house where Layla had lived with her father, a whirlwind of events was also unfolding in the wake of her escape. On the night before her final departure, Layla sat at the desk in her room, illuminated only by the light of a small lamp. Her fingers trembled as she held the pen, but her resolve was stronger than any hesitation. She knew she couldn't leave without an explanation, no matter how much it might hurt. The letter she was writing wasn't just a farewell, but an attempt to open her heart to the man who had raised her, albeit in a rigid and controlling way. "My dear father, today I write to you with a heavy heart but also full of hope. I am not leaving out of a lack of love or gratitude. I know everything you have done has been with my future and our honor in mind. But the truth is, I cannot live a life that isn't my own. I cannot marry a man I do not know or live in a gilded cage just to follow traditions that do not represent who I am. I have discovered something you may have never considered. Freedom is more valuable than any wealth, any status, or any promise of security. I have found someone who showed me this, someone who understands the desert as I do, someone who sees in me more than the weight of our obligations. I am sorry, Father, for breaking your expectations. I know this will bring shame and perhaps pain, but I cannot betray my own heart. I hope that one day you can forgive me and understand that I am following what I believe is the right path for me. With love, your daughter, Layla." As she finished the letter, Layla placed it on her father's desk, alongside a small locket that had belonged to her mother. It was a symbolic gesture, a reminder that her decision was inspired by the strength she had inherited from the woman who had left them too soon. With a heavy yet relieved heart, she departed into the darkness, heading toward the oasis where Farouk awaited her. The next morning, Layla's father found the letter. At first, he couldn't comprehend what he was reading. His daughter's words struck him like a blow, each sentence a mix of defiance and confession. His anger erupted as he realized the wedding, meticulously planned in every detail, would be ruined. He shouted, ordering the guards to go after her immediately. The thought of Layla, his obedient daughter, making such a bold decision was unthinkable. For days, he sent men to scour the desert, but Layla and Farouk had vanished like shadows among the dunes. Each failed search deepened his fury and frustration. He felt humiliated, betrayed, powerless to control the destiny of his own daughter. But time is a balm that softens even the sharpest pains. In the weeks that followed, Layla's father began to reread her letter. He realized her words were not those of rebellion but of a soul yearning for something greater than he could offer. The image of Layla as a prisoner of luxury, unhappy and stifled, began to haunt his mind. Slowly, he came to understand that her desire for freedom was not an act of selfishness but a cry for authenticity. Gradually, his anger was replaced by an unfamiliar sense of pride. His daughter, though she had defied everything he believed in, had shown a courage he could never have imagined. He began to recount stories of her with a glimmer in his eye, speaking of how Layla had inherited her mother's adventurous spirit. Though he never heard from her again, Layla's father learned to accept her for who she was. He started walking through the courtyard at dusk, gazing toward the desert horizon, imagining where she might be. Perhaps, he thought, she was finally happy, living the life she had chosen. And even if he never saw her again, he knew that a daughter's love for her father could not be erased, even by the sands of time. In this acceptance, he found his own freedom, letting go of the weight of tradition and embracing his daughter's choice as the greatest act of love he could offer. Some time later, after living in the desert, Layla began to feel a growing longing for her father. Despite her happiness with Farouk, she knew she needed to face him and find peace. Determined, she shared her wish with Farouk, and though he was concerned, he supported her without hesitation. When she arrived at the family home, Layla dismounted her camel, her heart racing. Her father appeared at the entrance, surprised, and for a moment he stood frozen. Then, with tears in his eyes, he ran to embrace her. Layla, overcome with emotion, returned his embrace, feeling the bond between them reignite. After composing themselves, he invited both of them inside. Farouk, feeling a bit uneasy, hesitated but was encouraged by Layla and accepted. Inside the house, Layla's father apologized. With heartfelt sincerity, he admitted that her letter had changed his perspective, helping him see the mistakes of the past. He said that if he could turn back time, he would have acted differently. Layla also apologized for causing him pain, but explained that she needed to pursue her freedom. They embraced again, this time with no resentment, only love and understanding. Layla's father thanked Farouk for taking care of her and invited them to stay for a while, offering his home as theirs. During the days they spent together, their bonds grew stronger. Layla's father came to respect Farouk, and Layla finally found balance between her freedom and her family's love. When they departed for the desert once again, she knew she had gained more than she had sought: reconciliation, love, and a peaceful future. The freedom to be true to yourself is priceless, and true love is the kind that respects your essence and your choices. Did you enjoy this moving story of courage, love, and reconciliation? Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories like this one. Share this with someone who also needs to hear this message about following their heart and finding true freedom. Let's spread more love and hope together. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.